Elite design, better comfort, more grip. Our new Pure Grip Socks Elite add engineered compression, an anti-blister base, and more grip to keep you locked in. Available now at puregripsocks.com.
2024 has been the year of speed boots, and inside this box I have yet another new entry into the category. From a brand that I would argue desperately needs to prove themselves because their last several releases haven't been the best. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to the brand new Umbro Velocita Matrix Pro, a complete redesign coming from the previous generation that does share some common elements, but ultimately introduces all new Soleplate and stud pattern tooling that I will admit is hugely improved, as well as a very unique one-piece four-way stretch, completely exposed pro weave knit upper that just might be the most slippery upper on the ball that I've ever experienced on a pair of football boots. Which I realize sounds like a bad thing, but depending on personal preference, you might actually like it. Oh, and there's one more thing, the price tag. Something that I think Umbro has gotten horribly wrong over the last several generations, and unfortunately, they have not changed that with this latest model, where the Velocita Matrix Pro retails for $275, which for comparison is $15 more than the two most popular speed boots on the market right now in the Nike Mercurial Vapor 16 Elite and the Adidas F50 Elite. How or why they thought that was a good idea, I have no clue. Where, let's be real, for the vast majority, the price tag alone is going to be a major turnoff. There just aren't that many people that I think are going to be willing to pay almost $300 for a pair of Umbros. But if we were to ignore that aspect of these football boots, put them on a level playing field when it comes to fit, feel, and overall performance, how do they stack up against the competition? We're going to discuss exactly that as we go over all the details of the boots along with how they fit and feel on feet. So if you're interested in learning more, please stick around, watch the entire review, and if you are interested in a pair for yourself, you can pick them up below their normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes by checking out the first link down below. And as always, if you enjoy the unsugar-coated, brutally honest reviews on the channel, don't forget to drop a like on the video and make sure you're subscribed if you haven't already, so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2024. So first things first, and this has absolutely nothing to do with performance, and perhaps I'm completely alone on this one, but I happen to think that this is the coolest looking Umbro boot that they've put out in quite some time. Where if you look closely, the Umbro double diamond, as well as the written out Umbro logo on the medial side, is simply just thicker yellow dots within the smaller yellow dots on this blue base for this particular colorway, all part of this one-piece four-way stretch pro weave upper, where all of this material on the surface is left fully exposed as just pure knit material. Which, just to put the exposed knit thing into perspective, if we take a look at this laceless F50 Elite, the laceless system on top is fully exposed prime knit material, which to the touch is pretty much the same texture as a pair of socks, where if you've ever kicked or juggled a ball in a pair of socks, you know that there really isn't much grip to be had, which is exactly the choice that Umbro have made with this new Velocita Matrix Pro. There is basically no additional grip on the ball whatsoever. Where the last couple Velocita models have also had some exposed knit sections, but never to the same extent as this, and not with this slick of a texture. They've almost had a little bit of a rough finish before, and this definitely has a little bit of grit to it, but you can see even when I rub my finger on it, if you just listen, there's just not a lot there. And if you listen to this clip of me just dragging a ball, it's almost completely silent, and that's because the surface of the ball is gliding almost freely across the surface of this upper, where with a normal pair of football boots, there's typically some type of a material that is designed to give you that little bit of grip, which again, doesn't necessarily translate into better touch or performance or whatever it may be. But if you are somebody that does not like having extra grip, perhaps you are a dragger of the ball and you never want the ball to feel like it's sticking to your feet, I don't think there's ever been a better pair of football boots than these right here. The term sock boot has become such a common phrase in the world of football boots these days, but I really think that this takes it to an extreme that we've never had before, in that these genuinely offer the same grip levels on the ball as if you were just playing in your socks, which admittedly does take some getting used to. For dribbling, I personally don't mind it because I do tend to be a little bit of a dragger of the ball, so having that slicker finish I thought was actually really nice. When it comes to juggling and controlling the ball, I did find that the upper can be a little bit slippery when it comes to doing tricks, but when it comes to general play, I didn't really find it to be that much of an issue. And when it came to shooting, yes, you're definitely going to notice that these have less grip than most football boots, but again, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's detrimental to the performance because again, once you get used to it, it just feels totally normal. It's just when you compare it to other football boots that it stands out as being so different. To make a long story short though, if you dislike having a lot of extra grip, you'll love the feel of this upper, whereas if you like having more grip on the ball for the sake of that controlled feel, these probably aren't for you. As for the feel of the upper against your foot, it's a 4-way stretch material. However, the entire inside, or at least the majority of the inside, is reinforced by like a thin fabric support cage, and the backing of this upper is also heavily covered in basically a glue, where you can see there's those little cutouts there that expose some of that glue. It's a little bit tricky for me to show you, but I think you can see the glue on the underside, meaning that yes, it does have 4-way stretch and there are some parts that aren't reinforced, but the majority of the upper is reinforced internally, making it feel relatively structured all the way through, where combined with what I think is actually a really nice shape from Umbro on this football boot, the overall fit and lockdown is well above average for, again, what they've offered in their speed line for the last several generations, where I found the boots to actually be pretty comfortable, pretty well straight out of the box. There's a little bit of stiffness to them, but after 10 minutes or so, they soften up quite significantly. The one thing that I would change, however, I shouldn't say one thing, there's actually a couple things, but the heel in particular, you can see it does have this extended back, and it's very much curved straight up and down rather than kind of being a little bit more contoured. So when you put these on, you feel like you sit inside of the boots, and because of the design of the heel liner, it tends to grab your heel and lock it in place nicely. However, having that little bit of kind of like a contoured roundness to cup your heel more so than grab it is something that I personally would have preferred, but again, that's more of a personal preference than anything. And then the one-piece upper, you would expect to be very stretchy across the top of the foot, but the underside of this tongue area is completely reinforced. So this has very little stretch, even with the laces loosened up, making putting the boots on a little bit trickier than I was honestly expecting. The one-piece construction though, once you do get them on your feet, does wrap very closely along the top of your foot, and because of the lacing system, you have great overall adjustability, where once you do tie the laces tight, the boots, like I said, feel very secure pretty much all the way through. They do, of course, maintain a low-cut construction. You do have a thin internal plastic heel counter. The lining material is this really soft kind of microfiber with some grip dots as well. It's got a little bit of like a pillowy padding on the very back. Reminds me a lot of something like the X18.1 from Adidas. Then the insole, fully removable. I'll give you guys a quick look at that. Very straightforward as far as football boot insoles go. A standard mesh liner on top, and what is, quite frankly, kind of a cheaper, thin black foam for the insole itself. For $275, I'd probably expect a little bit more, but football boot insoles these days are pretty much as cheap as they've ever been. With my final complaint about this upper being this little flap here at the end of the tongue, that because they didn't make the slit deep enough, you'll find that it ends up folding over on itself and staying like that, which kind of reminds me a little bit of a Mercurial Vapor 3 and its mini tongue, which in a way is kind of cool, but personally, I would much prefer if it just stayed up like this rather than folding over. But again, you guys will see that when I get the boots on feet. Moving to the base, you're going to find the all-new Propulsion Plus system, which, like I said, is hugely improved over the last several Velocita models, where what they had on offer simply was not up to par. As far as design is concerned, you're going to find in navy blue kind of a more standard, rigid, structured plastic material, and then inserted on the underside, which you can see exposed here in a lighter blue color, is their recycled Pebax Renew material, a licensed material that we see so many different brands using, known for its responsiveness and general durability. I would say this sole plate definitely trends on the more flexible side through the forefoot, but as you can see, does have that spring back. But because of how soft the flex is initially, you don't really feel that spring back effects when the boots are on feet. However, unlike previous models, it is properly structured through the midfoot by way of what I hope is not a typo, but I kind of think it is. It says support spin rather than support spine, and I can only think that it was meant to say spine given that it's on the section of the sole plate that appears to be a spine, and I couldn't see anything about support spin in the tech specs on their website. So quite possibly an actual typo in the sole plate tooling. We'll have to wait for an answer from Umbro on that one in particular, but the sole plate, like I said, does feel quite good, although definitely not a standout in the speed boot category. If I had to compare it to anything on the market right now, it actually is very similar to what you're going to find from the F50 Elite, which again is a fairly unextraordinary sole plate in terms of overall feel, but it does get the job done. As far as the stud pattern is concerned, it's also been completely redesigned, and as you can see, features a majority chevron bladed stud shape with one blade at the base of the forefoot and one conical stud, prioritizing rotational movements, where really the main tech spec that Umbro lists on their website is that they've made the studs longer for more aggressive traction, where in reality, all they've really done is gone from a hard ground stud pattern where the studs were super short on their previous generations to now a proper length FG stud, which, would you know it, just by making the studs longer, not to mention with a better layout, the traction is hugely improved, where honestly, if we're comparing this to most speed boots on the market, these offer really aggressive traction. Can you really pinpoint the rotational benefits from this one conical stud? Not really, because you're pretty much going to be on the balls of your feet where all of these are in contact with the ground anyways. Unless you can magically pivot on that one stud, it's probably not going to benefit anything in regards to overall performance, at least nothing that I could personally feel. But if you're looking for plenty of bite when pushing off on firm natural grass, this definitely gets the job done. And then there's the weight, which is an area where Umbro has typically excelled when it comes to speed boots. They tend to be pretty light, and this new Velocita Matrix Pro is no different. In a size 9.5 US, side by side with a Vapor 16 Elite from Nike in the exact same size. We'll start off with the Nikes, and you can see that they weigh in at 6.7 ounces, the equivalent of 189 grams. Remember those numbers, change the scale back to ounces, and we'll throw on the Umbros, and you can see that they weigh in at 6.6 ounces, the equivalent of 188 grams. Which means that the Umbros are actually 1 gram lighter than the Vapor 16s, effectively the exact same weight, let's face it, but the fact that they are asking this premium and are at the very least matching their competition in terms of weight is definitely a positive thing. On feet, there are a lot of positives when it comes to this new Velocita model. As far as feeling like a pair of speed boots, they fit tight, they feel responsive, you're very secure inside of the football boots, and they are remarkably comfortable. Where I think a lot of people would be surprised with how these feel is despite the very sock-like all-over knitted appearance that they have, the material itself is actually quite dense and compressed, where you have that glue, you have that internal structured fabric liner, where the boots as a whole don't necessarily have the softness that I think people would expect from something that looks so much like a sock boot. It has more of that kind of structured synthetic feel with the pliability that I think comes along with a knitted base material. So again, they feel very good, but it definitely is more on the structured side than I think a lot of people would anticipate. You will also notice that little flap folds over pretty much instantaneously as soon as you start moving around. There's really no point to fix it because it's going to go right back where it came from. Doesn't get it in the way, but it is a little bit annoying to look down at. As far as the overall width and shaping is concerned, I think Umbro have done a very good job here in the sense that I do think these fit really well and are quite comfortable through the heel. Like I mentioned, I wish it was a little bit more contoured. It's more straight up and down, but I think that's also going to be very accommodating for somebody with a little bit of a wider heel. The one thing I'll say about the shaping of this football boot as well as the design is because of the one-piece upper construction as well as the internal structure underneath where the laces are positioned, there's just not a lot of volume. So if you're somebody that did have a super wide foot or a particularly high arch, I could definitely see there being some issues in regards to pressure across the top of the foot through the midfoot area. But I think for the vast majority of people, once you get them on your feet, after a little bit of wear time, they should be quite comfortable. Probably not ideal for super wide feet though. And then as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So if you are looking to get a pair for yourself, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. So in conclusion, I actually think the Umbro Velocita Matrix Pro is a really solid pair of speed boots. It fits well, it's comfortable, they're responsive, they're lightweight, the traction is aggressive, the sole plate feels solid, the touch on the ball gives you that premium barefoot feel, with really the only wild card here, and there's no other way to say this, the upper is slippery on the ball, which I think for the vast majority of people would be considered a bad thing, but if that is your thing, then I think you'll really like what these boots have on offer. But then it also circles back to the $275 price tag, where I think that alone is going to be enough of a deterrent where most people are never going to consider these if they're on the market for a pair of speed boots, and quite frankly, there is definitely better value to be had. If they were to drop the price significantly and add a little bit of grip, I honestly think that Umbro would have a winner here.